A tired maid fell asleep in her millionaire boss's bed. He entered the room, saw the scene, and acted in silence. No one knows what happened there that night, but the next day, nothing between them was the same. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The silence of the penthouse filtered out the distant sound of the city, creating a capsule where everything seemed suspended. Ashley felt the weight of each step along the marble corridor, her worn shoes contrasting with the luxury around her. Another workday that had begun before sunrise and extended into the night. Her body begged for rest, but there were still 3 rooms to clean in the Anderson mansion. At 28, Ashley carried on her back much more than the backpack with cleaning supplies. There was her 6-year-old son waiting at home, the overdue electric bill, her mother's medication that cost almost half of her salary. Every dollar counted. Every overtime hour was a blessing disguised as sacrifice. She had been working for the family for 2 years, but rarely saw the owner of the house. Richard Anderson was just a distant figure, a name on the paycheck, a presence felt through the expensive objects scattered throughout the house. That Friday, the fatigue was different. Matthew, her son, had spent the night with a fever, and she had barely been able to close her eyes. Between cold compresses and medications, only 2 hours of fragmented sleep remained. Even so, she couldn't miss work. She couldn't disappoint Mrs. Carter, the housekeeper who had hired her with the promise that she was reliable. The last room on the list was the master bedroom. Ashley always left it for last, not because it was more difficult, but because there she felt the weight of the difference between worlds. The king-size bed cost more than she earned in a year. The closet was bigger than her living room. The tempered glass windows offered a view that she only knew from afar, from the bus that brought her to work. Upon entering the room, exhaustion finally overcame any protocol. Ashley looked at the impeccable bed and felt dizzy. Just for a minute, she thought, just to regain her balance. It wasn't about disobedience or boldness. It was about basic human survival. She sat on the edge of the bed, then lay on her side, promising herself it would only be a few minutes. Sleep swallowed her like a gentle wave. For the first time in months, Ashley slept without dreaming of bills, without worrying about schedules, without the constant noise of anxiety hammering in her ears. There, wrapped in luxurious silence, her body finally found the peace it had been searching for. Richard Anderson arrived home 2 hours earlier than expected. The meeting with Japanese investors had been cancelled at the last minute, freeing up his afternoon. At 35, he commanded a financial empire that had grown exponentially over the last 5 years. Each of his decisions moved millions, each word carried weight in the market. His life was a calculated sequence of commitments, strategies, and results. He went up to his room unhurriedly, already anticipating the relaxing bath he would take before reviewing the week's reports. He opened the door and stopped instantly. There, in his bed, was a woman sleeping. For a moment, his executive mind tried to process the information: intrusion, compromise, security, emergency protocol, but something in the image made him hesitate. She was one of the house staff. He vaguely recognized her, although they had never exchanged more than polite greetings in rare encounters through the corridors. She seemed exhausted even while sleeping. Her face, partially covered by strands of dark hair, revealed delicate features that he had never noticed. There was something vulnerable, and at the same time strong about her, a contradiction that intrigued him. Richard looked at the security monitor in the corner of the room, where cameras recorded all angles of the house. With an almost automatic movement, he turned off the system. He didn't know why he had done that, but the idea that others might see that scene bothered him. There was something too intimate, too human to be recorded. He took a blanket from the closet and approached slowly. Ashley was breathing with the tranquility of someone who had finally found true rest. Richard covered her carefully, trying not to wake her. He sat in the armchair next to the bed and opened his laptop, pretending to work, but his eyes constantly returned to her. How long had it been since he had seen someone sleep so peacefully? In his world, sleep was functional, timed, optimized. How many people in his life allowed themselves to be vulnerable like this? How many surrendered to fatigue without fear, without calculation? Ashley woke up 40 minutes later, her eyes opening slowly until they realized where she was. The shock came in waves. First the awareness of the place, then his presence nearby, finally the dimension of what she had done. She sat up immediately, her heart racing, her hands smoothing her wrinkled clothes. "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was very tired and—" Ashley tried to form coherent sentences, but the words came out jumbled, laden with shame and fear. Fear of losing her job, of disappointing Mrs. Carter, of going home without knowing how to pay the month's bills. Richard interrupted her with a gentle gesture of his hand. "You don't need to apologize. You were exhausted." His voice was different from what she had imagined. Lower, more human. She noticed that he had covered her, that he had remained there while she slept. The attitude didn't match the cold image she had built of him. "You work very hard, Ashley." The mention of her name surprised her. He knew who she was. "I'm going to talk to Mrs. Carter about giving you a week off. Paid, of course. And I want you to know that this isn't about charity. It's about recognizing that you do exceptional work and deserve to rest." Ashley couldn't believe what she was hearing. A week of paid leave was more than a gift. It was salvation. She could take care of Matthew without rushing, take her mother to the doctor, breathe without watching the clock. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I don't know how to thank you." "Call me Richard," he said, surprising himself. Ashley nodded, still processing the unexpected kindness. When she stood up to leave, their eyes met for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. There was something in that look that she had never seen before, something that made her forget for an instant the differences between them. The week off passed like a dream that Ashley didn't want to see end. For the first time in years, she could wake up without an alarm clock, prepare breakfast without rushing, sit on the small balcony of her apartment, and simply exist. Matthew completely recovered from the fever, and they spent entire afternoons in the park, building sandcastles in the sandbox and inventing stories about kind dragons and brave princesses. But along with the rest came a restlessness that she couldn't explain. The memory of that moment in the bedroom returned in flashes. The way Richard had looked at her, the unexpected kindness, the blanket he had placed over her. Ashley tried to convince herself that it was just employer compassion, but a part of her suspected there was something more, and that suspicion frightened her. When she returned to work the following Monday, Ashley felt physically renewed but emotionally alert. She arrived earlier than usual, greeted Mrs. Carter with renewed energy, and dedicated herself to tasks with the determination to show that the time off had been worth it. She cleaned, organized, prepared everything with her usual care, but there was a subtle difference in her movements, an expectation that she wouldn't admit even to herself. Richard, for his part, had spent the entire week thinking about that encounter. During important meetings, he found himself remembering Ashley's serene, sleeping face. At social events, he compared the women around him to her image, and they all seemed too artificial, too performative. He had tried to rationalize those thoughts, convince himself that it had been just an unusual moment, a break in routine that would soon be forgotten. But he couldn't. On Tuesday, Richard deliberately changed his schedule. He came home earlier, extended lunch, found excuses to walk around the house during the period he knew Ashley would be working. It wasn't something conscious at first, but soon he recognized the pattern. He was looking for her. The first encounter after her return was casual, in the hallway near the library. Ashley was carrying a tray with cleaning products when she saw him approaching. Her heart immediately raced and she tried to maintain professional composure. "Ashley, good to see you back. How were your days off?" The question sounded genuinely interested, and she noticed that he had slowed his pace as if wanting to prolong the conversation. "They were wonderful, Mr. Richard," she corrected herself, remembering his request. "Thank you so much for the opportunity. Matthew is completely cured and I was able to take care of some pending matters." "Matthew is your son?" Richard asked, and Ashley nodded. "How old is he?" His curiosity seemed sincere, and she found herself answering with more details than she intended. 6 years old. He's a very smart boy, loves stories and drawings." Ashley's voice softened when talking about her son, and Richard noticed how her eyes lit up. It was a subtle transformation, but powerful. "He must be an interesting child, having a mother like you," he said, and immediately regretted the intimacy of the comment. Ashley blushed slightly, not knowing how to respond. They stood there in the hallway, looking at each other in a silence that said more than any words. "I need to continue working," Ashley finally murmured, breaking the moment. Of course, of course. I don't want to interrupt." But neither of them moved immediately. It was Ashley who took the first step, continuing down the hallway with her heart still racing. Richard watched her walk away, noticing for the first time the grace of her movements, the dignified posture even while carrying cleaning materials. The encounters became more frequent. Richard began to find reasons to be in the rooms Ashley was cleaning. He asked about work details, offered water, commented on the weather. The conversations were brief, superficially polite, but charged with a tension that both felt and neither named. Ashley began to expect these moments. She fixed her hair before entering each room, chose her work clothes more carefully, paid attention to the times when he usually was at home. She felt guilty for these thoughts, but couldn't avoid them. On Thursday, the first emotional slip occurred. Ashley was cleaning the main living room when she knocked over a decorative vase. The object didn't break, but the noise startled her so much that her hands trembled for several minutes. Richard appeared immediately, attracted by the sound. "Is everything okay? Are you hurt?" He approached quickly, and for a moment Ashley thought he was going to touch her, check if she was injured. The concern on his face was genuine, intense. No, everything's fine. Sorry about the noise, Her hands were still shaking as she picked up the vase from the floor. Without thinking, Richard extended his hands to help her. Their fingers touched for a brief moment, and both felt an electric current. He held the vase but didn't immediately let go. She didn't withdraw her hands. They stood there, connected by an insignificant object, looking at each other with an intensity that was frightening. "Ashley," he whispered, and the name sounded different in his voice, more intimate, more charged. She abruptly withdrew her hands as if she had been burned. "Sorry, I need to finish here." Richard nodded, but remained standing there while she resumed work. He observed her every movement, every careful gesture, every time she discreetly looked in his direction. The tension in the air was almost palpable. That night, Ashley took longer than usual to finish her tasks. Part of her wanted to prolong her time in the house, the possibility of one more encounter. When she finally prepared to leave, she found Richard at the main entrance. "Ashley, can I talk to you for a moment?" There was something different in his voice, a contained urgency. "Of course," she replied, her heart racing again. He guided her to the living room, an environment she only knew professionally. They sat at opposite ends of the sofa, maintaining a safe distance, but the intimacy of the moment was undeniable. "I know this may seem strange, but are you okay? I mean, really okay? Is there anything you need besides the work here?" The question caught her off guard. Ashley felt her eyes water, not from sadness but from surprise at the unexpected kindness. No one had asked her that in a long time. Why are you asking?" "Because I see how you work. I see the tiredness in your eyes, even after the week of rest. I see that there's much more to you than I imagine people notice." Ashley looked at him, trying to decipher if this was real or just her imagination creating meanings where there were none. Richard maintained the gaze, and in that moment, both knew they had crossed an invisible line. There was no more pretending they were just employer and employee. There was something growing between them, something that neither knew how to handle. The following days were marked by a careful dance between Ashley and Richard. Conversations that lasted longer than necessary, gazes that were sustained for precious seconds, accidental proximities that left traces of tension in the air. Ashley tried to keep focus on work, but felt constantly alert to his presence. Richard, in turn, had subconsciously reorganized his routine to maximize casual encounters. On Tuesday of the following week, Ashley received an unexpected message on her cell phone during lunch hour. It was from Richard, sent from the personal number he had given for work-related emergencies. "Ashley, I hope you don't mind the message. I wanted to thank you for the special care you've been taking with the library. I noticed that the books are organized differently, more intuitively. Thank you for seeing beyond the obvious." She read the message 3 times before responding. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, "I'm glad you liked it. I've always thought that books deserve to be treated with special care." His response came in minutes. "You're right. By the way, if you ever want to borrow any, feel free. I'm sure you would take good care of them." Ashley put away her phone with her heart racing. This wasn't just professional courtesy. There was an implicit intimacy in the offer, a recognition that she was more than just an employee. She was someone he trusted, someone he saw as an equal in at least one aspect: appreciation for books. That afternoon, when she finished cleaning the library, Ashley lingered among the shelves. She ran her fingers over the titles, imagining which ones Richard had read, which ones had marked him. She chose a volume of short stories by Raymond Carver and discreetly put it in her backpack. It wasn't theft he had offered. It was a bridge being built between two worlds. Richard noticed the missing book the next morning. He smiled to himself, imagining Ashley reading at home, perhaps aloud to her son. The image warmed him inside in a way he hadn't expected. There was something deeply intimate about sharing books, about knowing that the same words that had once touched him were now passing before her eyes. On Thursday, an unexpected storm changed everything. Ashley was finishing work when the sky dramatically darkened. The first drops started timidly, but in minutes transformed into a violent downpour. From inside the house, through the panoramic windows, she watched the street transform into a river. The bus certainly wouldn't come. The neighborhood streets always flooded with rains like this, and Ashley knew she could be stuck there for hours. She calculated mentally. Matthew was with the neighbor until 8. She had time, but the anxiety of being away from him during a storm made her uncomfortable. Richard found her standing near the main entrance, looking at the rain with a worried expression. "You won't be able to get home in this storm," he said, approaching slowly. "I'll wait for it to diminish a bit." "Matthew is with the neighbor, so there's no rush," Ashley replied, trying to sound unconcerned. "Ashley, look out there. This isn't going to stop anytime soon, and even if it does, the streets will be flooded for hours. Why don't you stay here tonight? We have guest rooms, you would be comfortable." The offer caught her completely off guard. Staying overnight in his house was crossing a dangerous line, and they both knew it. "I can't, it would be inappropriate." "What would be inappropriate would be for you to try to go home in this storm and put yourself at risk." Richard spoke firmly, but without pressure. "It's just a practical matter, Ashley. You have family waiting at home, you need to get there safely." Ashley hesitated. His logic made sense, but there were layers of complication that frightened her. What if someone found out? What if Mrs. Carter knew? What if she herself couldn't handle the situation? As if reading her thoughts, Richard added, "Mrs. Carter already left earlier because of the rain, and you can call your neighbor, explain the situation. I'm sure she'll understand." After a few more minutes of hesitation, Ashley yielded. She called Mrs. Rose, who confirmed that Matthew was fine and could sleep there. The elderly neighbor had raised 6 children and seemed relieved to be able to help. With that concern resolved, Ashley accepted the offer. Richard led her to a guest room on the 2nd floor. It was elegant but welcoming, with a comfortable bed and a partial view of the garden. He brought clean towels, a t-shirt and shorts that had been left by an ex-girlfriend. "If you need anything at all, my room is at the end of the hallway," he said, and Ashley nodded, thanking him once again. After he left, Ashley bathed in the private bathroom, put on the borrowed clothes and looked at herself in the mirror. She seemed different there, out of her work uniform, in casual clothes, in that luxurious environment. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to belong to that world. Richard, meanwhile, walked around the house like a caged animal. The awareness of her presence there, sleeping in his house, affected him in a way he couldn't control. He tried to work, watch television, read, but nothing worked. Ashley was there, just a few meters away, and that changed everything. Around 10 o'clock, he heard footsteps in the kitchen. He went downstairs and found her preparing tea, seemingly lost in thought. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. "The rain is very strong, and I'm not used to so much silence," she replied, smiling timidly. "At home there's always some noise from the street, neighbors, Mrs. Rose's television." Richard prepared another tea and sat at the kitchen table across from her. It was the first time they shared a space in such a domestic, natural way. The soft kitchen light created an intimate atmosphere, and the rain outside isolated them from the rest of the world. "Ashley, can I ask you a personal question?" he said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. She nodded, although her heart accelerated. "How do you do it? Work so much, take care of everything alone, and still smile the way you smile?" The question surprised her. Ashley lowered her eyes to the tea, thinking about the answer. "I don't know if I'm as strong as you think. There are days when it's very difficult, but Matthew needs me, and that gives me the strength to continue." "And you? What gives you strength?" Richard was silent for a long moment. "Honestly, Until recently, I thought it was success, business, achieving goals. But lately I've been thinking that maybe it's something simpler. Moments like this, perhaps." They looked at each other across the table, and Ashley felt that the air around them had changed. There was an implicit confession in his words, a vulnerability she hadn't expected to see. And there was also a danger that she recognized but didn't know how to avoid. The storm continued all night, and with it the awareness that something fundamental had changed between them. They were no longer just employer and employee sharing courtesies. They were two people discovering a connection that neither had sought. The next morning arrived with an awkward silence. Ashley woke up in the guest room with the feeling that something had irreversibly changed the night before. The conversation in the kitchen, the looks, the intimacy of that moment, everything seemed suspended in the air, like an unfulfilled promise. She put on her work clothes and went down to the kitchen, where she found Richard preparing coffee. "Good morning," he said softly, and Ashley noticed there was a contained tension in his voice. "The storm has passed. The streets should be passable now." "Good morning. Thank you for your hospitality," she responded, maintaining professional courtesy. But they both knew the words didn't express the complexity of what they had shared. Richard served coffee for both of them, and they drank in silence, each lost in thoughts they didn't dare verbalize. When Ashley prepared to leave, he accompanied her to the door. For a moment they stood there, looking at each other, as if they wanted to say something important but didn't know how. "Ashley," Richard began, then stopped. She waited, her heart racing. "Take care of yourself today," was all he managed to say. In the following weeks, both tried to return to normalcy, but there was a new layer of awareness in each interaction. Richard caught himself paying attention to details that previously went unnoticed. The way Ashley hummed softly while working, how her eyes lit up when she talked about her son, how she always left a flower from the garden in a vase in the main room, a small gesture but full of care. Ashley, in turn, began to notice more human aspects of Richard. She discovered that he worked late, not just out of ambition, but because he had difficulty relaxing. She observed that he spoke on the phone with his mother every Thursday, always with infinite patience, even when she repeated the same stories. She noticed that he read voraciously, not to impress but out of genuine hunger for knowledge. 1 month after the storm, Mrs. Carter retired. The news caught everyone by surprise, including Ashley, who suddenly found herself being considered to take over the administrative responsibilities of the house. Richard called her for a formal conversation in his office. "Ashley, you know this house better than anyone. You know every detail, every need. I would like you to take the position of head housekeeper, of course with a significant salary increase and additional benefits." The offer was generous beyond her most optimistic expectations. It represented financial stability, professional recognition, the possibility of a better future for Matthew. But Ashley hesitated. "Can I think about it?" she asked, and Richard nodded, although he was surprised by the hesitation. "Of course, take all the time you need." That night, Ashley spent hours awake, weighing the decision. Accepting would mean more time in the house, more responsibilities, more contact with Richard, and that last prospect frightened her, because she knew her feelings for him had grown beyond what was safe or sensible. The next day, she asked to speak with him again. This time, he suggested they talk in the garden, in a less formal environment. They sat on a bench near the fountain, surrounded by the perfume of the flowers that Ashley always tended to with such care. "Richard, I need to be honest with you," she began, and he felt his stomach tighten. "I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but I don't know if I can accept." "Why? If it's about the salary, we can negotiate." "It's not about money," Ashley interrupted him. "It's about other things." Richard looked at her fixedly, trying to decipher what she wasn't saying. "What other things?" Ashley took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. "It's about what's happening between us. You know there's something. I know there's something. And that makes everything more complicated." The confession hung in the air between them like a simultaneous revelation. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, processing the relief and terror of finally having it named. "Ashley, you're right. There is something between us and I don't know what to do with it. That's why I can't accept the promotion. It would be unfair to you, to me, to all the other employees. People might think that you got the position for other reasons," Richard completed, perfectly understanding her dilemma. "And you're right, it would be unfair." They sat in silence for several minutes, each absorbing the magnitude of what they had admitted. Finally, Richard spoke. "Ashley, I need to tell you something. Something that might change your perspective on all this." She looked at him, preparing herself for any revelation. "My company is going through a restructuring. In the next few months, I'm moving to the New York branch. It will be a permanent move." The news hit Ashley like a punch to the stomach. She hadn't realized how important Richard's constant presence had become until facing the possibility of losing it. "When?" she asked weakly. "In 2 months, maybe 3, Ashley nodded, trying to process the information. "This changes things, doesn't it?" "It changes everything," he confirmed. "Ashley, I know there's a huge difference between our worlds. I know there are complications that we may never completely resolve. But I also know that what I feel for you is real. And I know you feel something too." She looked at him, her eyes shining with contained tears. "I do. More than I should. More than is sensible. But Richard, we both know that this is complicated, unlikely, difficult," he completed, "but not impossible." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we should try. Not now, not this way, but when I move, when things calm down, when you have time to think about what you really want." Ashley felt her heart race. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious, Ashley. You've shown me things about myself that I didn't know existed. You've made me want to be a better person, more present, more real. I can't just leave that behind." Tears finally ran down Ashley's face. Years of tiredness, of struggle, of loneliness seemed to dissolve in that moment. Someone saw her, really saw her, and valued her for who she was. "And Matthew?" she asked, always thinking of her son first. "Matthew is part of you. If I want you in my life, I want him too. He deserves a better future, just like you." In the following 2 months, Ashley and Richard maintained a tacit agreement. She continued working normally. He prepared for his move, and both allowed themselves moments of careful proximity, longer conversations, some shared meals, a gradual and respectful knowledge of each other. When the day of Richard's departure arrived, Ashley was at the entrance of the house, as she had always been, but this time not as an employee. He approached her, held her hands, and said, "I'll call in a week. We'll talk about the future, about possibilities, about how to make this work. Would you be up for that?" Ashley nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, I would." 6 months later, Ashley was in a small but comfortable apartment in New York, which Richard had helped secure. She worked at a specialized cleaning company, with fair pay and hours that allowed her to adequately care for Matthew. Richard visited twice a week, getting to know the boy better, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The social difference still existed. The complications were still real, but they had found a way to navigate them together. Ashley was studying business administration in an evening course that Richard had insisted on funding. Matthew attended a better school and constantly talked about Uncle Richard, who taught him to play chess. It wasn't the fairy tale ending some might expect, but it was real, built on solid foundations of mutual knowledge, respect, and genuine love. It was proof that sometimes different worlds can meet, not through magical transformations, but through the willingness of 2 people to build a bridge between their realities. On a Sunday afternoon, as she watched Matthew and Richard playing in the park near the new apartment, Ashley smiled to herself. She had learned that true love doesn't erase differences, but makes them irrelevant in the face of the genuine connection between 2 souls that recognize each other. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that Ashley and Richard's story has touched your hearts deeply. This narrative about how true love can overcome social barriers and build bridges between different worlds is just one of the many exciting stories we've prepared for you. If this journey moved you as much as we hoped, we invite you to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories we've prepared with such care. Leave your like if Ashley and Richard managed to bring a smile or a tear to your eyes. And don't forget to tell us in the comments which moment impacted you the most. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of human feelings and the surprises that life holds for us. Share this story with someone you know needs to hear about the transformative power of true love. We'll see you in the next story. And thank you so much for being part of this emotional journey with us.